As we near July 4th, the United States birthday, one event stands at the center of its founding: America's Declaration of Independence from England. But in the years leading up to 1776, many colonists wouldn't have even called themselves Americans. Most still saw themselves as Englishmen. So how did loyal subjects become daring rebels? Several events paved the way for the bold move. For over a century, Britain and her American colonies were distant relatives. Being an ocean away, the colonies were left mostly unsupervised, and thanks to what historians call Britain's policy of salutary neglect, they largely had free rein to govern themselves. But seemingly overnight, Britain wanted control again. Britain had been fighting the 7 Years' War, a deadly and costly war that stretched across its entire global empire. Part was fought in America, what we now call the French and Indian War. It involved French and Native American forces fighting Britain and the colonists for land, and ended up pushing France out of America.
Right, Tatton, but that victory was not without unintended consequences. One war paved the way to another, the American Revolution. After the French and Indian War, 10,000 British soldiers stayed in the colonies to protect land won and keep colonists from crossing the newly established Proclamation Line, a national border imposed by England, meant to keep the peace with Indian tribes. But many colonists felt cheated of the land they just fought to win. And those British soldiers needed somewhere to stay, so the British Parliament passed the Quartering Act of 1765, forcing the colonies to pay for the soldiers' food and lodging. And then the British Empire started taxing the colonies. Britain doubled its debt during the war and needed to pay it off somehow. So it taxed sugar and banned the colonies from printing their own money. Then it taxed all printed documents.
From the Crown's perspective, the fees were a small price for the colonies to pay for England's protection.
But to the colonists, the acts were adding up to a fist, a gut punch to the political liberty they'd enjoyed since coming to America. Plus, it was seen as a pretty lousy thank you for the colonies' part in winning the war.
And eventually, disagreements got physical. In one case, a mob of self-described patriots began taunting British soldiers guarding the customs house in Boston, throwing snowballs at them. Then, a rifle went off. In the ensuing riot, 5 Americans died. The soldiers were under command of Captain Thomas Preston. The next morning, a British loyalist visited John Adams.
With tears streaming down his eyes, he said, "I am come with a very solemn message from a very unfortunate man, Captain Preston, in prison. He wishes for counsel and can get none."
Adams believed everyone deserves a fair trial, so he took on the unpopular job of defending Preston in court.
Most Bostonians wanted blood in return, stirred up by anti-Preston propaganda that had been circulating. John Adams' second cousin, Samuel Adams, dubbed the riot the Boston Massacre, and Paul Revere made an engraving titled "The Bloody Massacre in King Street."
That autumn, Adams argued for Preston's defense, and 3 days later, Preston was found not guilty. A second trial, in which Adams defended Preston's soldiers, reveals the core of his argument.
"We are to look upon it as more beneficial that many guilty persons should escape unpunished than one innocent person should suffer."
6 soldiers were found not guilty. 2, guilty of manslaughter, escaped capital punishment with only their thumbs branded. John Adams' defense of Preston and the British soldiers may have been unpopular at the time, but by standing up for justice, he paved the way for the right to a fair trial and built a reputation as a man of principle that helped him later become the second president of the United States.
Frustration over Britain's renewed oversight continued to escalate, and colonists began committing bigger acts of rebellion, such as the Boston Tea Party, which we've reported on previously.
In response, Britain wanted to force the colonies to submit to its authority. Rather than compromise, it passed more acts, what colonists called the Intolerable Acts. And Britain demanded everything from payment for the losses from the Boston Tea Party to stripping the Massachusetts colony of its right to self-government. One final attempt to reconcile with England was made in the form of the Olive Branch Petition, but too late. The king declared the colonies to be in open rebellion, and fighting had already begun earlier in the year.
For the public, many argue the final straw was Thomas Paine's pamphlet Common Sense, turning most colonists still loyal to the king against the idea of monarchy for good. And within the Continental Congress, the seeds of independence were almost ready to sprout. Looking back, many historians say it's incorrect to call this a revolution. Usually, a revolution is when an existing government is overthrown and replaced. But the colonists didn't want something new. They wanted to keep their rights as Englishmen and their long-held tradition of self-government.